All right. Welcome everybody to Gogotalx, brought to you by GOGOTIX. I'm your host, as always, Malachi Johns, and today we are joined by Dr. Natalie Hopkinson. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. Thanks for making the time.
My pleasure.
Cool. Yeah, I could. You look a little bit grainy there, but hopefully we'll be all right. So, can you tell everybody where how you got interested in go-go music in particular and the music industry?
Sure. So I got really interested in go-go music when I was a reporter for the Washington Post. I worked in the Prince George's County office, and my job was to produce an arts guide. We're very specific around PG County, and I got on Cato Hammond's list, the T-Mont Go-Go list. I don't know how I got on that email list, but I was getting a lot of those emails about things that are going on, and then he started promoting this book called The Beat,
Yep.
And I got pretty excited because it made my job a lot more interesting.
Mhm.
Back at that time, there was a lot of tobacco farms, gravel roads, that kind of thing, and so it just opened up a whole world for me to explore, and that's what I'm still doing.
Gotcha. Your audio was a little low. I heard tobacco farms and dirt roads. Were you speaking about where you grew up? I missed.
No,
That's all right.
I was speaking about, I was actually speaking about my first job writing about the arts in Prince George's County, Maryland,
Ah,
and I was in the office was in Upper Marlboro, and um, that was there was a lot going on. So I was pretty excited to learn that there was a whole scene from Cato, and the work that he was doing. That there's like a whole scene in PG County, and
nice.
so that's what it was so pretty exciting. Actually, that time it was really exciting.
How did you, or where are you from originally?
I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada,
Okay.
and then I moved to Indiana at 10 years old, and then I moved to Florida when I was 16. So, but then I've really been in DC longer than I've been anywhere. I
Gotcha.
came,
And you
yeah,
you moved in '94, you said?
yep, yep.
And you moved here for a job, or your parents moved here and then you?
I came here to go to Howard.
Gotcha. So you,
Yeah.
but you hadn't been exposed to go-go at Howard until after? Really? That's
Nope.
interesting.
No, I mean just like the butt, Spike
Right,
Lee, but I didn't
right.
know that was being called go-go.
Didn't
So
know the concept.
I actually had not been exposed at all.
Wow, that seems crazy. I don't know. I just have this vision that everybody that goes to Howard somehow learn, like there's like an informal class on go-go or something like
Nope.
that. Like everybody that I've ever met that went to Howard, if I say something about go-go, they're like, oh yeah, I know about go-go. I went to Howard, so that's interesting. That's
Well, in the '90s when we were there, and I talk about this in my book, there was a lot going on, like the black hole, all those things on Georgia Avenue were like right in the area of Howard,
yeah,
and Howard students were explicitly told not to go to the IBEX, told not to go to those
really.
places. Yes, yes.
By the faculty or by other students?
By residence life. So my husband, he was a freshman. He lived in Drew Hall, like all freshmen boys do, and that was part of like their orientation. Like, yeah, there are these things happening, and you don't need to go to them, because really at that time, DC was so hot. Like there was so much like gun violence,
Oh
and
yeah.
so there was the idea that like this was one of the ways. I don't know. I guess they thought they were making them safer by keeping them away from that sort of thing. But then I've heard other things. Like so I did a conversation with Ta-Nehisi Coates earlier this summer about some of the work that he did on go-go back in 2000, and he talked about seeing go-go's on campus, like at in the Blackburn Center, which I never ever thought, I never experienced that. But he was a year ahead of me at Howard. So I guess maybe there was some more overlap than I thought. But for the most part, go-go is like, there's all these class issues around it, all these respectability politics. So, we're talking about an institution, like a bougie institution, it might be the thing like that's blending.
Well, yeah, there was definitely, it seemed like I guess, and then I don't know what point in the 90s you're talking about, but there definitely was a point where it became, like not as, you weren't considered as high class if you were into go-go anymore. So that definitely seemed like that was happening towards the later part of the 90s for sure.
Oh yeah, well, I talk about in my book, Mark Barnes, how he famously said to the city paper, if a DJ ever played go-go, they'd be fired. There's no go-go allowed, and if anybody got caught slipping, because playing go-go, people are going to be happy if you play go-go, but he did not want that because that was his way of distinguishing himself.
Yeah, well, and it's funny. I got a lot of heat from a friend of mine when I interviewed John O'Neill, who's the talent buyer from City Winery, which is the old Love nightclub, and I mentioned that because I was actually the one booking a lot of the go-go bands that have been playing at City Winery up until the world shut down, and I got a lot of heat from a friend of mine when I said that it's interesting that Mark Barnes, who got his, at least as the legend goes, got his start, in promoting go-go parties, famously later on then became the anti-go-go guy. And I remember, when I had Mambo Sauce, I was managing Mambo Sauce, and we were the hottest ticket in town, and he still wouldn't let us do our he wouldn't let us do the Welcome to DC release party at I guess it was Park at the time. I think he had just opened Park, if I remember correctly, and we wanted to, we thought it would be cool to be able to show off the fact that we were go-go, but we were trying to make a bigger impact to do it at Park, at this place that famously won't allow go-go, and he still said no. And so I thought I mentioned the irony of the fact that now there's this this middle-aged white guy, who previously, prior to booking City Winery, was booking Hill Country Barbecue and booking in Austin, Texas before that. And here he is like, bring me go-go, bring me more go-go. Meanwhile, the guy who got started in go-go, who used to own the place, no go-go. I don't want it. So yeah, there's an interesting psychological stuff going on there that is a little.
It's really, yeah, it is. It's really like class, there's all these class issues, respectability politics, like people, like even, so I remember we did the Go-Go Summit back in 2013. I wrote about this when I had a column for The Root, where basically we talked about, like somebody asked, well, go-go is something we did back in the day. We moved on. Why would you want to learn about that? Like people really felt like it's something that, okay, that's what you do in your young, wild days. And then, as your tastes mature, and for me, I just find this to be extremely anti-Black. Like, why are we afraid of who we are, like at our core? And why would you want to outgrow that? Like, it's just, there's all these hangups. So that's why I just think in the last year and a half, the narrative change around go-go that I've seen since Don't You See is absolutely, like, my head is spinning. Like, I can't believe the conversation I'm having. We just had participated in this event with Kenny McDuffie. They're giving $3 million in investments to go-go. Unbelievable. Like, it's like my head is actually still spinning. I can't even believe that this is really happening.
Me either, because I distinctly remember certain people in the go-go community felt like Mambo Sauce wasn't a go-go band because of
Right.
the difference in the way that we approached it and the way that I set it up. However, I never shied away from that, and I remember that there were people there were promoters that would be like, okay, well, I want to book you to play in this club, but you can't just say you're an R&B band because they don't, they're not really going to know the difference, and then you just bring the congos in through the back door. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. If this is a go-go band, yes, it's a different take on what traditional go-go is, but this is a go-go band, and I'm not trying to run away from go-go just to make up a few $100. I want to change the stigma around go-go is this bad thing that we need to run away from. It's a beautiful, powerful, amazing thing that we need to run towards. And yes, I have a lot of constructive criticism, and from my opinion, which is of course just that, my opinion on what I think we could do to make it better. And I understand that my opinion runs contrary to some people's opinion. My opinion is that I want to see a go-go band or a go-go artist headline Coachella, while there's a large contingent of people that think it's cool just to stay where it is, and it's our own little special thing that we should keep and should be precious. And I certainly respect that opinion. I just don't agree with it. I want to see it.
Why not both?
Well, that's I agree with that as well. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think that Rare Essence can still play at Fast Eddie's every Friday night, and you can have another band that goes on tour and plays festivals and plays. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I don't think that one cancels out the other.
I think you're going to see a lot of that.
You might want to check the connection settings in the Google Home app.
Sorry, my Google Home thing is talking to me. I don't know. Must have thought it heard you say, "Hey Google."
About something that I'm doing wrong.
What's that?
I said I don't know if it was talking like maybe I'm doing something wrong.
No.
I think we're going to see a lot, and that's what I'm thinking. Like this investment in go-go from the city that's happening. Like I have really high hopes about what's going to happen moving forward, because it's like the investment hasn't been there. People were not able to disconnect the music from, say, gun violence, like,
right.
Or these things that are like real serious problems, but don't
right.
actually have anything to do with the music. So we're kind of gotten to this place now where more people are recognizing this treasure, this community treasure that DC, Washington County has been keeping for themselves. Mm-hmm. And there's opportunity, so we'll see what happens. And also, I mean, I don't know whether this is a moment where, maybe there's more crossover. I don't know. But what I'm also really interested and excited about is some of the more institutionalization, looking at like teaching, bringing music back into schools and teaching people the tradition. Regardless of what happened, I think about them as two different things. Like, I don't feel like go-go needs to be successful or to fulfill its potential. Go-go does not have to headline Coachella. I think that'd be great if it did, but that's not like, I don't think that's the only thing. I mean, I think that if people can know that there's this amazing industry and this amazing art form that was created here, that was done by people here, for people here, something that's connected so much to the African diaspora experience, and something that's global, that has global connections. If people can kind of understand that, and this is a moment when we can tell that story. I think that that will be a great thing that comes out of all.
Well, so because that was actually one of my sort of questions was what is the success of go-go look like to you? So having said that, how does that actually manifest in the real world? Like, in what way would you want people to know that? Like, how would that happen?
So I would say first, go-go is successful. I think that people have and when we were doing the WDC stuff, like I would do these. I'll never forget this panel that I did at a church. God, I can't remember it.
Community of Hope.
Grayland. Anyway, it was a church. We did this panel talking about WDC, and somebody said to me, "Well, of all the things that people could take to the streets about and sign petitions about and do all these things. Like, you know, we have education is in shambles. You know, we have housing crisis. People are being displaced. You know, all these things, real serious things are happening. Why this? And what I told him was that I was like, you're a DC native, aren't you? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, I know, because DC natives take this for granted. They think it's just normal to have a whole industry that you created, that you control, that you know, where, you know, like people just think that's just like, oh, they really just take it for granted. And it's not something that, it's something that is so extraordinarily unique. Like I really struggle. I can't think of anything that's comparable to that. And so I think that it's been around, that it's survived. No public investment, no major white investment. Like, how does that even happen in America? You know, like it survived on its own, you know, on its own terms. So I consider that something like a major point of success. Where I think that things could get even better is if people like know it and understand it, and people like preserve it, and people tell the stories, and people capture the stories around go-go, and people pick up more instruments. Because there was a time when, you know, most neighborhoods had bands. You know, it was sort of like kind of like a quasi New Orleans. Like if we could sort of get back to that revival, kids being inspired to like make music and express themselves and play for their friends and have that sort of community connection, that would be amazing.
Well, how would people, I guess the disconnect for me is, how would people outside of DC know about it unless it is, I mean, and I certainly don't think, I mean, I remember your comment in the documentary about the, you know, the difference between hip hop and go-go, and the fact that hip hop is, you know, obviously been co-opted by the white, you know, corporate record label system, and that go-go hasn't. And the fact that the Black dollar circulates in the go-go community, and I think that's a great, well, maybe not obviously, because I'm obviously not Black, but I do think that would be a great thing. My only pushback to that, though, is that I know, you know, probably 75% of all the musicians in go-go, and know that I can count on one hand or two hands the ones that make a full-time living out of go-go. And that's what I would like to see. I would like to see more, you know, more musicians, and more, not even just the musicians, but the sound guys, the, you know, the everybody that's in the sort of go-go ecosystem, be able to actually make a living off of doing it. And I don't know how you would do that unless it spreads further, because just the simple economics of it, because the bands are so large, there's so much money that needs to be split up between everybody. Even though the bands are, you know, a typical go-go musician, local musician, probably makes more than your average touring musician that's just getting started. But, you know, over time, assuming that the touring musicians audience grows and that pie becomes bigger, then that's, you know, they do get to be, or they get to be, you know, work with a higher profile artist, then they start to make enough to be able to, you know, support themselves. But I don't know how do you do that in go-go just on a local level, or am I misunderstanding your?
Yeah, I think that so that's something different, right? So like somebody who breaks is a big national artist and sort of breaks out, and that has happened, you know, like so Wale, or like even like Michelle and Gogotalx, who's in a band, you know, like you have people who have done the thing, which is like, you know, being like major pop star, major money.
Right.
That is something different than what go-go is, you know, and go-go is something that is, it's a community, like it's a way of life, you know. So it's like, you know, even though Benny had a day job, you know, Sugar Bear, like these people have day jobs.
Donnell Floyd, 32, Killer Cow, almost everybody in go-go has a day job.
I'm glorify it, because I do think that like if an artist wants to be a pop star and they want to be Jay-Z, Beyonce, like I'm not begrudging them wanting to do that. Of course, I mean, you should be able to maximize your potential, your earning potential, all of that. And I definitely, I think that some of the investments that are coming are going to kind of increase people's ability to do that, because, you know, if you're making original music, then that means that you could make more money, right?
For sure.
But that's something different than what go-go has been. Go-go has been a community art form and a way of life for this community. It's a connection between the fans and the musicians, and that's special in its own way. And it's not
100%.
It doesn't follow the same paradigms as like your, you know, maybe like your mainstream music industry. But I don't think that makes it like, I think that it just doesn't follow the same paradigm. It's just a little bit different. So, you know, you know, you always hear people asking, that's always a question that people, okay, when is going to go mainstream? When is it going to go? When is it going to go? All of that. And I don't know a single artist who does not want Jay-Z money. Like, everybody wants, of course we want that.
Right.
But there are certain sacrifices, there are certain, compromises that the artists have to make that make it unrecognizable to fans. And so, you know, like even EU sort of learned that, you know, like Spike Lee wrote that song, right?
No, Marcus Miller wrote the song.
Well, Spike Lee and Marcus Miller wrote the song, right? And so they're not like, it wasn't like a, you know, it wasn't like how go-go songs are usually, you know, it just wasn't how it usually is done. And, you know, when they achieved a lot of national success and a lot of touring, there was a sense that they had moved away from the roots, and they had sort of gotten, and so there was, you know, they would really struggle for a while, you know, to sort of get back in. So,
right, and I think it was Big Tony maybe that I was speaking with about that, because that's sort of a familiar or a constant refrain when talking about, you know, exactly what we're talking about, whether go-go should be a nationally recognized genre, or you know, sort of stay this you know, underground thing like we have it. And that's, you know, that same thing had been said about, you know, Trouble Funk, about when they came back from, you know, being on tour, that it was difficult for them to get their crowd back. But and my question related to that is that every band, I mean, I started playing go-go in 1992, so I haven't been around obviously since the 80s, but every band has sort of, you know, like, even if you just look at Junkyard, like throughout the years, they're up, they're down, they're up, they're down, they're up, they're down, they're up, they're down. And, you know, but they never stopped cranking. They've been cranking the whole time. It wasn't that they did anything different necessarily musically. It was just, you know, there's sort of a cycle of popularity that happens with every brand. You know, I mean, Northeast Groovers, like I was with Northeast Groovers when we were up, and I was with Northeast Groovers when we were down. And so my question is was the difficult period that EU and Trouble Funk experienced after coming off a tour, you know, or off the success of the Butt, was that really because they had done this other thing, or was it just part of the natural cycle of the up and down, you know, popularity cycle in go-go? Because I feel like even though those are two very, very sort of visible examples that we can point to say, well, see, that's what happens if you try to do something different. The fans are going to leave you. And I just sort of feel like maybe that's not necessarily the case. I mean, I could be wrong, because there's no proof, there's no evidence to suggest that I'm right. But I also feel like people are like scared of even trying, because they think that's what's going to happen, because that's the story that we've been saying so long about. Oh, see, if you try to do something different, you're going to end up like Sugar Bear. You know what I mean? But Sugar Bear's doing okay as far as I can tell right now. You know, they just been doing this. You know, I just saw EU perform out here in LA with my wife last year, so they're not doing too bad for themselves. You know?
Yeah, I mean,
what do you think about that?
I mean, these are like anecdotes, so there's two examples.
For sure.
But I mean, I just don't think that artists have not been trying. like, I mean, I'm sorry, it's not like artists have not been trying to go national. To do, artists have done all sorts of things. You know, some of them we might know about, some of them we might not. And you know, it's what it is. But I just think that it's, you know, when you think about what go-go has meant, you know, in this community, and how go-go honors these traditions that are part of the African, you know, West African traditions, the way that, you know, like I'm really proud. I think it's something that's wonderful. And I think that part of why I've been so interested in go-go and writing about it for so long is that it really is an alternate way of understanding pretty much everything. You know, so like whether it's a music industry or whether it's artistry, it's or not, yeah, it's definitely like a non-Western, non-European way of understanding. And so it's non-European, but then it's also very American too, because it's very capitalist. It's very much about making money too. So
100%.
You know, wonderful mix, and it's just endlessly fascinating to me. And I'm just so like, I just respect what artists do so much, you know, like how you build that community, like how do you get people to come see you night after night? How do you keep it fresh to them? I mean, it's like church. Like how do you keep people coming back over and over again and bonding with each other? And you know, that like that's something that's some sort of like magic that they're doing, and that they've been in, and the storylines that people have been following, like I did for the GOGO archive at the DC Public Library. I did some oral histories with Big G and Ronald Moten. So we talked about like GOGO and activism. And one of the things that I asked, I was just like, what is it about G? Like G could say, if he was going to meet outside my window right now, like it'd be flooded out there. You know, like what is it about him? And one of the things that Mo said is that people have watched his whole life unfold. They've seen him go, they've seen him up, they've seen him down, they've seen him struggle, they've seen him succeed. They've been on this roller coaster of a life with him. And they are riding with him, you know, because they've seen it, they've lived it with him, and it's sort of like it's unfolded on stage in a very public way. And so people are feel really strongly about, you know, about him as a person, and they really feel like really excited. You know, it's sort of like even me, who's, you know, non-DC native. I haven't been in it as long as a lot of people are, but I'm always excited to be able to hear those songs again. You know, I'm just excited. It just shows so much resilience. Like how much human resilience should one person be asked to, you know, to like, how much can one person be asked to suffer? You know, and how can one person still maintain this very like positive, you know, forward looking, you know, optimistic, like, and you know, so you hear that in the music. And so
yeah, I mean, to literally get shot on stage at some, you know, and still come back and say, I'm going to dedicate my life to this music. That's like legendary hero shit right there.
And he's just one example. Use him as one example, but like there's so many, like that's part of, I mean, as what I understand it anyway, I just think that's part of the whole bit about, you know, go-go. You know, people grew up with James Funk, you know, and people like, I was talking to one of my friends, I was on a panel with Simba Sana, who's a writer. He wrote a novel where it's sort of fictionalized, but it's really part of his life growing up in DC. And he talked about how he had people who had Benny accents, or they had James Funk accents, you know, where people like, you know, affect, you know, like the little affect that James Funk had. And you had people who sort of like spoke that way, and you have people who sort of spoke the other way, you know, like people, like these are like hugely influential people, you know, in the community. And they were like, you know, like superstars, but you could touch them and dance with them and groove with them. It's really special.
Yeah, no, it is a dynamic that I agree with you. I don't think that it exists anywhere else, where you literally have, you musicians or that are literally stars, but you can like just go up and talk to them, which is not, I mean, it's sort of like the precursor to, it was like social media before social media, or like, the Cameo app, where you can pay. I mean, it's not exactly the same thing, but you can pay whoever celebrity to wish happy birthday to your aunt or something like that. Well, you can just go up and give G a piece of paper and say happy birthday to my aunt, and he'll do it on the stage, in front of thousands of people. It's crazy.
Or
So
social network before social network.
Right, exactly, yeah.
People who you're going to meet up with as who's playing on stage, so it's about like it's the whole community, like this whole reunion that you're having over and over again.
Yeah, 100%. And then even shout out to Cato for taking that a step further with T-Mot, because that was literally like the really social network. I mean, that a lot of the success of Mambo Sauce, or the the initial buzz of Mambo Sauce, came from that community on T-Mot, and being being a part of that at PA Palace as well, but more at T-Mot for sure. So I want to get into you are the co-founder of Don't Mute DC, and so I would imagine that most people watching are familiar with the whole story, but for anyone that may not be, or for anyone who may be watching this afterwards and doesn't know what happened, can you break down what happened that sparked this entire movement and what your involvement with it was?
Sure. So I teach at Howard University, and I was teaching a PhD program, and we've been studying gentrification. I've been writing about gentrification. Actually, two things I've been writing about: gentrification and go-go for the last 20 years. And Ronald Moten is a friend of mine. We were noticing a lot of attacks on Black businesses around 2018. So there were a bunch of by gentrification. And so I actually had my students go visit him and check his store on MLK in the fall of 2018. And we were sort of exchanging notes on all the stuff that's happening. And so there was a attack on one of my neighborhood restaurants, Jam Dum, this Jamaican place. And I was so disgusted. And he called me, and there was somebody else getting attacked in Petworth. And he was like, we were just angry.
What do you mean by what do you mean by attack on the business? What exactly happened?
Like people getting on listservs and trying to stop them from getting like licensing, people harassing them, people trying to, calling police, people organizing against these businesses, because mostly gentrified, like they see themselves as like the soul and the funk that a lot of us love about DC. They don't necessarily like that. They don't like the audiences. They don't like the crowds that these businesses attract. And so there are these organized campaigns. Often it would be online. And so there would be these organized campaigns against these businesses. And by the time the business owner knew what was happening, they're like out of business, And so this has been happening over and over again. And so in March, Don Campbell called Mo, because this situation with Don Campbell's the owner of Central Communications. He had been playing music outside his store for 25 years, and started
landmark
neighbors. And so Mo called me immediately, because we were like, what? Because again, we've been really raging about this for months, and seeing like a real clear pattern. And so
So do you think, real quick, I'm sorry to interject, do you feel like this pattern just uppity white folks that don't understand the culture and are being Karens, for lack of a better term, or was there a more nefarious motive behind it? Do you feel like there was some kind of like developer in the background being like, okay, let's get this place shut down and we'll use this network of people so that we can, build our condos or something like that? Was it to that effect, or do you?
Both.
Okay.
In all of these instances, I mean, on the one level, it's Karen. But Karen is doing the bidding for these developers who would love to get their hands on all these properties. And
gotcha.
so Mo called me, and so we had started talking. Like, I was so angry because I don't live very far from Central Communication, and to me, it's like, as I've seen the neighborhood change, that's one thing I know. I'm still in Chocolate City when I go on that corner and I hear that music. And I will cut somebody over that corner. Like, seriously. I will commit violence over that, because I'm saying, like, all the other things are happening. That is the same, and it's beautiful, and he's had his business, and that's the other thing about these attacks on these businesses. It's not like they're not successful businesses.
Right.
They're fine. They do fine financially. They just don't want them. They don't like the people who are there. They don't like the music. They don't understand it. They don't like the clientele. They don't like they don't like seeing these people there. So Mo was like, okay, we got to do a petition. And so I was like, okay, I had never done a petition before. And so I was literally at my office at Howard on the computer, like, looking it up, like, okay, change. And I was like, what, like, change.org? He's like, yeah. So I was like, okay. So I did the petition. You could only put one name. So I actually used Mo's name and picture, but both of our names were on the petition itself. But I knew, like, I would have two people sign it if it was in my name. So I put it in Mo's. Like, he was, at least the picture was his. Even though we were both signed, like I said, I'm the author of this book, and he's this, and blah, blah, blah. And so that thing got like over 80,000 signatures from around the world. And we were able to take the data later, and it really broke down, like, really only 20,000 of those were from the DC area. Like, overwhelming. We had people sign a petition from every, like, 95 different countries. People signed this Don't Mute DC Go.
So this was the initial thing that happened, and you sent this out. This was pre sort of the publicity around it. So how did I'm asking? Okay.
So it all happened at the same time. So we started talking to Don, but Don didn't really like. I was really ready to turn up, and as Mo was too. But Don didn't want.
Mo's always ready to go.
Mo stays ready to turn up, but Don didn't want to, because he just wanted to keep his business. Because really what they had done was when they didn't get the answer they wanted from the police, because they kept calling the police on him, and when they they refused to shut down the music, they called T-Mobile's headquarters, and then threatened them with lawsuits and said, you got to turn off this music. And so he was really just trying to hold on to his contract. And so we were trying to sort of wait. So this is March when he initially talked to Mo, and Mo called me. And then around first week in April, a Howard student named Julene Broomfield posted. She noticed that the music was turned down, not off totally, but like down. And so she started tweeting about it and noticing, like, look, a block away, there were like these white people are playing music really loud, and what's going on here? So then she said, she's the one who coined the term Don't Mute DC. And so when Julene actually posting that hashtag and it sort of going viral over the weekend, that was the thing we needed to be like, look, Don, like we should probably just go ahead and turn up now. So, right. So on the Monday, I think she created a hashtag on Saturday. Monday, I put the petition up, and then, like, almost immediately we got international attention. Like I said, it was like, I can't remember, it was some ridiculous number of countries, that definitely. Like,
what do you think? Why do you think that happened? Was it because it tied? Because obviously gentrification is happening in multiple places, including LA, where I am as well. Do you think that was the through line that made people in other places care? Because traditionally, people in other places don't even know what go-go is. It's not that they don't care about it; they just don't even know what it is to even,
Yes. So
what do you think caused that?
I think that's okay, I think the number one thing, because there were also like about 5,000 comments that are on this petition too. And so we were able to, I'm a communications scholar here, so I've downloaded all that data. I've looked at most people were just defending go-go. They were like, this is some BS, as far as the people who commented. But then So the real passionate people were like, this is who we are. But then you also saw people saying, you know what, the same thing is happening here in Cleveland. This is disgusting, and this is, so you did have people, connecting to that corner. And then actually it's surprising, like I didn't necessarily think more about it, but it's right at the Metro. So a lot of people who've been in DC have been on that corner, so they know what corner you're talking about. And I would say also because of the Howard students. I feel like I've lost him.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure whether there was some kind of weird glitch that happened there, but I think we're back now. Sorry.
Yeah.
So you can hear me and see me now, right?
I can hear you and see you now.
Okay, good deal. I don't. So you were talking
a lot of Howard students too that signed it, and Howard is a global network, so you have people in every state of the union. So when we broke down the data, we actually have it on don'tmuteDC.com. On one of those pages has a lot of this data on there. Every single state in the union signed. So people from every state in the union signed this petition.
Wow.
And then something like 95 countries around the world signed the petition. And people either connected with this idea of because, and also the way that I wrote was very simple. Don has been playing his music here. This is gross. Gentrifier, tell these gentrifiers that this is not okay. And people connected to the fact that, gentrification is something that's happening every year. And I think people also can relate to this idea of how disgusting is it? You got
the David versus Goliath.
Yeah, you got this small businessman playing his music, minding his damn business, and then you've got this big corporation come in and tell him to turn it down or turn it off. It was very. I think people connected to that.
And what was the time frame between when this started and when John Legere, the owner of T-Mobile, or the CEO, I guess, of T-Mobile, got involved and said, and do you think that he did this do you think he was ignorant as to what was happening first and would have made that decision anyway? Or do you think that he was pressured by the movement, of what was happening?
I mean, there's no question. He's pressured by the movement for sure. I think that, so T-Mobile is a franchise, right? Yep. So it's like McDonald's or anywhere else. They really thrive on making every single establishment exactly the same as the other one, right? And so to them, it was well, why would we be playing go-go music or do anything if we're not doing it in every other? When you go to T-Mobile, it should be this, right?
Well, they should play go-go at every single T-Mobile store in the entire world, and then they would probably do better than they're doing.
I think what we didn't understand, because in Don's Metro, he used to sell cell phones for every carrier, and at one point he was one of the top distributors on the East Coast. Partly location, but also. And this is where, maybe the corporate people didn't really understand their market. People go because they know they're going to hear music. People choose, that's a place, that's a destination, to go pay your bill because you're going to hear the music. So they didn't recognize how he had actually captured that market there. And, really they should have learned from him before they just go in there and, being all colonial about it, because T-Mobile had just acquired Metro PCS a few months earlier. So it's this is your first move, you maybe want to look at learn a little bit about the market first.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. So, I think the lesson there is, one day we probably is pressure bust pipes, So I'm glad it worked. I wasn't sure because he seems like, his public persona is such this. He just seems like a liberal dude. He seems like a guy that would be he's got a punk rock streak to him or something. Man, fuck the system, play the go-go, But I wasn't sure if that was, that's all just for show, and he really, You knew about it, and they also, you know, speaking of the franchise situation, it's like, you know, there's levels up to franchise. Like if there's a problem at one store, it's pretty unlikely that the head of the entire company is going to hear about something until it reaches critical mass. So I just wasn't sure if.
No, they heard about it.
Yeah.
So the other thing that was going on was that T-Mobile was trying to merge with Sprint.
Sprint, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so they were sort of like in the early stages of that. And if you've got some gentrifier threatening a lawsuit, you really just don't want any trouble. And so it did escalate. Even before the hashtag, it had escalated. I don't know that it escalated to John Legere, but it definitely escalated to the vice president of the company. He personally came and was like, you know what, turn this music down. And, you know, they, from our understanding, they were ready to actually just cut his contract, Don's contract.
Wow.
Because they just were like, you know what, we don't need it. We don't need any of this drama, you know. So, so that it easily could have gone another direction, and that would have been awful.
I'm just thinking that, I mean, I can, you know, from their perspective, I can understand to a certain extent. But at the same time, I think that situation is so go-go, because go-go is such an outlier from the way that things work everywhere else. And, you know, that it's like, you know, I'm a booking agent, you know, I've in the music industry full time, and there literally isn't anything else like go-go anywhere else, and you can't find out about go-go through the same channels that you find out about other concerts or events or anything like that. But it's so powerful, and literally bands and promoters can charge, you know, the same price as a Mary J. Blige ticket to come see Backyard, and it's every week. And it just, yeah, and it's just nuts. And it's just sort of like this weird sort of like anomaly in the world that just doesn't exist anywhere else.
Yep.
And I mean, you know, selfishly, I want to see it become stay a weird anomaly, but also be a weird anomaly on a 20 times bigger scale. That's just my own personal thing. But anyway,
I think it would be great too. It just wouldn't be like, I just don't. It's just not. It's not. Wouldn't be like go-go exactly. You know. So I don't. Yeah. So I just.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a distinction between. At least personally, I feel like there's a distinction between the culture of go-go and the music of go-go, because I feel like every person that's from DC that heard Crazy in Love or One Thing or It's Love, the very first thing you said is that's go-go.
Yep, or Jill Scott.
There's no, yeah, It's Love. Yeah, Jill Scott. Yeah, there's no lead rapper. There's no call and response. There's no percussion break necessarily. There, you know, there's a specific percussion pattern that is played within that music that is, you know, intrinsic to go-go. And so anybody that's from the area or had any, you know, interaction with go-go immediately recognize it as that's go-go. So to me, I feel like the music itself, I just feel a certain kind of way that Beyonce and Jill Scott, and not to say anything bad against them, but why should Beyonce and Jill Scott and Nelly and all of these people capitalize off of go-go and not the people that really make it? You know, that's just sort of my feeling on it. But anyway, we're not here to talk about that.
I think go-go artists should get paid what Beyonce get paid every day, of course, because I mean, what they're doing is like it's hard to put a price on what, you know, what the service, like, you know. Other thing, this interview we just did with G from Backyard Band, it's just in my mind, so I keep bringing him up. But he talked about like they've done whole funeral services essentially. You know, just like mourning people who've been lost. And, you know, and you're talking about getting DC through those are some really tough times. You know, there was the loss of life, you know, around gun violence and, you know, the drug trade. These are really, really difficult things. The disinvestment, you know, like you're in the city that like the whole city's falling apart. potholes you could swim in, like it was a mess. But, the music was there, healing, providing a balm, providing community fellowship. And, it's hard to put a price on that.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Well, speaking of putting a price on it, you mentioned this $3 million. There's been some controversy in the community about who is going to be accepting this $3 million and how it's going to be disseminated and to who it's going to be disseminated. Do you have any insight into what that process is? I am a little bit out of the loop being out here on the West Coast. And so I hear little bits of information here and there, but I don't really have the full picture. So are you in the know?
Yes, I do. So we just did this event.
Yeah, because you're on the board of the CAH, right?
I am on the Arts Commission. All these funds are not going through the Arts Commission because there are some significant challenges with getting the money out the door through the Arts Commission, and that's probably for another day, conversation for another day.
Gotcha.
For this round, this is one-time appropriations, and hopefully that if everything goes well, it could be something that can be continued every year. Because just to put it in perspective, $3 million is nothing.
Right.
The Arts Commission budget is $38 million next year.
Yep.
Events DC's budget is $200 million a year. The DC tourism industry is $8 billion. So $3 million is really just sort of like a nice little taster of what should.
It's a token. Yeah,
But I mean, the community is not that big, so I think a lot of people can get.
And it can make a difference.
So
it can make a big difference.
It's going to be a GOGO advisory board that will be convened that will help to oversee who gets the grants.
How is that board being determined? Do you know?
That board is being determined in collaboration with Angie Gates' Office of Cable Television, Film, and Television Entertainment.
That's my homie.
Events DC, and also the DC Public Library. They're all working on this. There is a good amount of the money, probably about $1 million will go, just $1 million will probably just go right out the door to artists. And maybe a little less than half of it will be simply COVID relief, because people haven't been working since March. So it's just simply like, actually, you just, it's just, you get your COVID, it's a COVID check, just like many artists have gotten, but GOGO artists, and again, not that some of us haven't tried, GOGO artists have not been getting much relief. So this will be a way to just simply get relief. There are also money that will go towards getting bands back in the studio. So there'll be grants to get them back in, record original music. There'll be some money for education. So mostly it's all like requests for proposals. So it's like nobody's promised the money. So I think that's really where there's some misinformation. Nobody's money. People would just have to apply for the money. And it's going to be, like it's I mean, and the goal is to get it out the door the next 12 months.
Right. So I think the few things that I've heard, or that the little bit that I know, which is negligible, is that I saw in one place, and I guess this probably was through the Arts Commission, so maybe this is not valid for whatever's not going through the Arts Commission, is that either in one year's guidelines you could be an LLC, and another year's guidelines you can't be an LLC. You can't be a company. You have to be just an individual to receive the grant, or you have to be a nonprofit. Or so, what do you have any insight into? Like, how does say if I'm a go-go bass player, if I'm the bass player for whatever band, what do I need to do to get the money? And then also if I'm a sound company, or I'm a band manager, or do you know what the criteria is for those different?
So the criteria will be developed in collaboration with this advisory board, and but like I said, I think, and so again, I'm just sort of like advising, on some of these things.
For sure.
I think that so when you're talking about the COVID relief, like it's really, I just, and this is just sort of me personally, I just think it's really important that the artists get paid. Like the people around have been paid, so like for the relief, the thing that's just straight up like, okay, this is just relief because you haven't been able to work. Those will go to individual artists. That they can be LLCs, they can be nonprofit. That isn't going to be a big consideration. That's one of the reasons why I had no, like, I mean, I'm on the Arts Commission, but there really wasn't much. I mean, I was like, we could have tried to get more money allocated through the Arts Commission, but it didn't make any sense because, again, there aren't any nonprofits, like these are LLCs. And so really to think about this in a way, and, to the Councilman McDuffie's credit, really thinking about it in a way, like, how do we get the money to actual go-go music? And the other big challenge, frankly, is, again, we talk about gentrification. People don't live in the city anymore because they can't afford, like, a lot of people have been pushed out already. And a lot of the real talent in go-go is out of the city. And so, and you can't not include the people who've been holding it up. So, like the way that this was done was, it's going to make it much more, it's going to make more sense for the way the go-go actually works in the real world.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is, do you have to be a DC resident to? Okay. All right. And then one of the other things that I heard, and this is the point of the reason that I did this show is because I feel like mainly it was because I just have a lot of the conversations with go-go, people in go-go all day long. And I was like, I'll just put it on camera so other people can, but there's a lot of misinformation that circulates in the go-go community.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to, not that I'm the ultimate source of the correct information, but I wanted to bring people on like yourself or like Big Tony or whatever that can talk about what actually happened when, Chuck Brown came back from tour and then Trouble Funk was big and then Trouble Funk left and then Chuck Brown was, like that I can't necessarily speak to so that you can hear from the horse's mouth exactly what's happening. So one of the things that I've heard is that, if the money doesn't get, if all the money doesn't get allocated, then it all goes to a specific person who shall remain nameless at this point in time, because there are a specific group of people. There's a feeling within the community that there's a specific group of people that have attached themselves to the government apparatus by which this, the spout, if you will, of this government money, and that if typically go-go musicians are not, they're in their day-to-day practice, they're not filling out requests for proposals or grant applications or things like that. I mean, I do contracts and shit all day long, but me looking at a grant application is I want to jump off the building. You know what I mean? So I can imagine, if, I'm just like the drummer or something. No disrespect to all my drummer friends, but
No, I know what you're saying. So first of all, that is absolutely false. Nobody promised anything. Right?
Gotcha.
And second of all, I think me being on the Arts Commission has been so useful because I see what you don't do if you want to get money to artists. What you don't do is you don't have, and when I got there, I noticed they had like they had COVID money that went out to the Arts Commission. And so I was trying to get go-go people to apply. And so I actually went through the application just to kind of, see to make sure. What do I see? You have to fill out your arrest and conviction record.
Oh, wow.
How does that have to do with playing drums? Like what?
Right.
I was like, what? So, I turned up on that. And, Kenya McDuffie had asked at the hearing, the oversight hearing, he was like, what is this? And then they removed it, but I'm just saying, like, how long has that been there? Like, what is that? Like, you do everything you can to like prevent people from feeling like this is their money, and it is their money. But anyway, you have to write, a 50-page application, like, okay, if you're a musician, maybe you're not into the 50-page application. So all the things that I've learned a lot from the Arts Commission about how not to get money to artists. And so I'm really hoping to the degree that I have any influence in this is that is trying to make it easy.
Right.
You know, like to me, the way I would say this failure. So there's some people who they'll get their COVID check and they might buy tennis shoes. I don't care, actually. Do what you want with it. I know there's going to be a lot of people who get money and say, you know what, I'm going in the studio and I'm going to make some more hits. And just by sheer number, I really do expect there to be a lot of new music, you know, a flowering of new. So it's fine if you do what you want with your COVID check, but then there's also a big chunk of money like, okay, we're ready to work. We want to invest in our website. We want to buy instruments and equipment. We want to, we want to do work on our branding, you know, like, so there'll be money to do all those things. So the smart people who really care about their artistry and really wanting to get better, they'll use this opportunity. And this is, you know, the fact that it's happened with COVID when go-go is illegal is a curse, but also a blessing. This means that it's time to just get yourself together, right?
Well, it's definitely a blessing for go-go because typically go-go musicians invest zero time in really being creative and recording because they're always worried about, I got to rehearse for these 6 shows that I have this week. And so now you don't have a show. So sit your ass down and write something, or sit your ass down and Google some other songwriters that can write stuff for you if you can't write it yourself. I always say on this show that I feel like there's this huge push for original music that I was definitely a big proponent of and still am, but just because you don't have to necessarily be. Whitney Houston never wrote a song in her life. You don't have to necessarily be the one that writes it. You just need to end up with a great song. It doesn't matter how you get to that point. And to me, that's what is missing from. I mean, there's a million things that are missing from go-go through the lens of how I look at it, which is that I want it to be seen on a bigger platform. But one of those things is hit songs. We haven't figured out how, the go-go formula of how to make a hit song.
I'm going to make a prediction.
What's that?
Some hit songs. There will be some. I don't know. Right. I don't know who's going to do them. You know what's so exciting to me? Like, so a lot of I've heard some of the grumbling, although I try to stay away from that stuff, you know. And, you know, some of the young people think that all the old heads are going to, you know, but what makes me so excited is that the young people actually care. Like they want to be part of it. Like nothing is cooler than getting paid, you know, to do something creative, you know. And so I just feel like it's going to inspire like a whole flowering, you know, of go-go. And that's what I really, and actually in order for this to be something that happens every year, which there's no reason why it shouldn't.
Right.
There's got to, you know, people have got to do what they do, and I know they will, which is get in there, be creative, do, you know, make new music, you know, get out there, do some creative videos, you know, like do some, you know, work on your website, work on your brand, and connect with people. If you don't know how to do something, connect with somebody who does, because guess what? You're going to have a little something to pay them, you know, at least something goes, you know, so we're not talking about huge grants here, but just a little something goes a long way. And this is really and this is like me getting into my history nerd piece. This is why the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities are so important. It's not that artists live off the money that they're getting from them. It's that they have assured that this is a sphere of activity. People don't even know what the damn humanities are. Like most people can't, I mean, a lot of times I can't even define it really like it should be, but it is guaranteed to be a sphere of activity in every state in the union because that's what the law said. And so that's where that's the opportunity we have with the go-go being the official music of DC. And we're starting to put some things into place. I'm also working on a project at Howard that I'm really excited about. That'll take a while to kind of get started, that will also be contributing to this. It makes sure that this is the sphere of activity forever. And so that's where I'm thinking about is like the long term, like go-go should be forever. And, nobody should ever take for granted that, this amazing thing was created right here. And it was young people picking up instruments, being in community with each other, having a good time, celebrating, just a celebration of life, and togetherness. Like, we should never forget that happens. And I think that with some of the legislative activity that's gone on in the last year, I think that we have a shot of doing that. And it's like probably late, but really on time, because the Chocolate City is, Black people are still the largest ethnic group. So I always try to start with that. Still like 45% of the population. It's still the largest group by far. But, our voice in the city is really declining. And it's very shocking, how much it is. And we are so defeated, and that's sort of just come back to Don Campbell. That's why I will cut somebody if they try to cut off his music, because a lot of other things we don't have any control over, but we can control over the voice, whether we have a voice, whether we respect our history and we respect our traditions. And to me, that's what him being there, and he's sort of single-handedly, been holding that space there without fanfare, without celebration, without anything. And, and I think that, I'm glad that he's I just think it's just really fitting that he's been doing that, but now it's time for other people to do that work too.
Gotcha. Well, so are you aware of, because I think, I guess, at least in my own mind, when I think of things like the Arts and Humanities Commission or National Endowment for the Arts or things of that nature, I think of, these are programs that exist for traditional forms of music that are becoming encased in amber and are becoming, like museum pieces. And so, and maybe that's a totally incorrect assumption. And so that's my question to you, is that I know there's famously Canada, invests very heavily in their artistic community, and I don't really know the evidence of how that works out, but it seems like they don't just invest in, from a government standpoint, they don't just invest in the legacy genres or legacy forms of music. They invest in creating new things, and to me, I think that's sort of one of the things that I talked to Chris Richards, my friend that from the Washington Post as well, and he talked about the beauty of the sort of not hand me down, what's the word I'm looking for, the just sort of the generations of go-go, like how the go-go gets passed down through the generations. And my fear is that the youngest generation, which is when I started playing go-go when I was 14 years old, they don't care about go-go anymore. They look at hip hop now, because that's the Shy Glizzies and the Rico Nasties and the Zammans of the world. That's who is making an impact that is, and I don't feel old. I'm 43. I don't feel like an old guy, but I know that when I was 14, 15 years old, I looked at a 43-year-old like, dude, you're somebody's grandfather, So my question is there a plan, or before I ask, is there a plan, are you aware of any other programs in the States that sort of foster that kind of, a younger generation kind of thing? And the reason I'm asking this is because in interviewing a lot of, and I knew about it before interviewing them, but it became really clear in interviewing like Charles Stevensons and, the Big Tonys and Wink and, the Showmobile, which was a city funded, proposition, was really what got a lot of these bands started and got the youth interested in it, because the truck would go around to all the neighborhoods and play the music. So are there any examples in the US that you are aware of that sort of use, government funding or city, local state government funding to fund like the younger generation and, that kind of thing versus just the Kennedy Centers of the world?
Yes. Great question. New Orleans is very good at that.
Mm-hmm.
you know, and sort of creating, supporting, and also, so New Orleans, they're good at that, period. And that, but it's also not just the government. It's just that's their way of life. It's apprenticeship and sort of passing things on. It's kind of like the way of life in New Orleans. And you see some of that in DC too. And some of the research that I've done, there are these informal apprenticeship programs that exist. You know, among drummers, for instance. I was interviewing the drummer from Belladonna for the Smithsonian, right before COVID happened. She told it, Shannon Brown.
Yep.
I don't know if I got getting her name right, but she told amazing stories about people like, you know, the drummers like pulling her aside and saying, okay, we need to get back in the basement because, you know, you sounded all right, but, you know, we need to go back, and then kind of really train her. There are ways to formalize those arrangements, and that's actually what I'm working on. What project that I'm working on at Howard is that there are ways that you can transmit culture and traditions from so apprenticeship programs. You pay a master drummer, you pay an apprentice drummer, and then you have a showcase for them. You know, so I've been learning a lot from, you know, I've been working with the Smithsonian for a couple of years, and they've been teaching me a lot about, you know, ways of.
I'm sorry, you were working with who for a couple of years?
The Smithsonian.
Okay, Smithsonian, gotcha.
That Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage. Sojin Kim is the curator there who I've been working with. We've been doing a lot of oral history projects, and so I've been learning a lot from her. And so learning from like sort of setting up similar things, like, you know, this is how they, you know, protect mariachi culture. So traditional cultures, there are ways that people do that. And so there are ways that lessons that go-go can learn from that as well. But I think, so that's important, like by itself, and that's the sort of museum case thing that you're talking about. Right? So I think that's important. But what I think where go-go is the opportunity, but if that's all it was, that'd be like a missed opportunity. Like I want to hear what the new sound is. You know, like Chris Richard, who you mentioned, who I think is brilliant, wonderful writer. He talked about bounce beat being a sound that's invented and not taught. You know, like it's not something you learn, it's something you invent. You know, and that's and bounce beat is like 20 years old. You know, like I hear like what are the new things? And to go back to what you were saying earlier, there is nothing cooler when you're 16 than getting paid. So like let them set up some of these programs, the summer youth programs, the you know, there's all this energy around creating you know, spaces for young bands. I was able to see a curriculum that DCPS developed. Some middle school teachers in DCPS did this whole curriculum, and it was so cool because like they had the kids making their own band, and they had to have the lead talker, and they had to sing, and then they had to have, you know, like they had to have all the elements of the band, and then they sort of took them through. I don't know how kids reacted to it, but you know, the fact is that these are pilot programs that are going on, and so, you know, and now, you know, they'll have a little bit of funding to be able to keep them going. So that's why I've been talking to members of the council about it. Like they're also very interested in education piece, but mainly it's like, okay, they should know what go-go was and what its history is, and then they should have an opportunity to get some instruments in their hands, and then they can take it from there. I can't sit here and predict what it's going to sound like, but I do think that it's hard because you don't want it to be something that isn't go-go. You know?
So where is that line? Because that's something that I've asked a few people. Like, how do you draw that line? And that's so I'm working on a project where because another thing that I ask a lot is, do you need a band to be go-go? Like if it can a producer produce go-go? And so I'm working on a project called 70/70 Sound, where I've gotten with 4 or 5 bounce beat producers. And my thing is, you know, I wrote a creative brief, and I said, well, originally we're doing remixes, basically bounce beat remixes of popular hit songs, because the structure of traditional go-go is obviously vastly different from the structure of, you know, pop music, which can be any genre, but just popular music, you know, whether it's country or rock or hip hop or, you know, whatever. And so I wanted to sort of provide a parameter that says, okay, you have to stick within the structure of what's happening now, not what was cool 10 years ago, not even what I did with Mambo Sauce, because that was 12 years ago, 13 years ago, but right now, what's on the Spotify top 50 right now. And so work within these parameters. And the idea is push the envelope as far as you can, because what I'm trying to do is create a form of go-go, and which is what I was trying to do with Mambo Sauce, was create a form of go-go that is true to what go-go is and doesn't run away from go-go, which I think a lot of go-go musicians feel like they have to do in order to be successful. That, I play in go-go to make money, but I'm really working on my R&B project or my hip-hop project, and I never wanted to do that. I wanted to take the same effort and the same professionalism and everything that goes into, what you would do with a hip hop project that you think might turn you into Jay-Z, and just apply that to go-go and just do it the same way. And so my directive to them was push it as far as you can until you're not sure if it's go-go anymore. And then dial it back. You know what I mean? Because the idea is, and because nobody really can, I don't think anybody can really articulate what that line is. I mean, in my opinion, it's about the percussion.
Yeah.
But then you can also, then that's just what you were talking about. You got the old guys and the young guys. Well, bounce beat isn't really go-go. And yes, it is. If Chuck Brown gets on the stage with T.O.B. and performs and says this is go-go, then it's go-go. And that's the same. When I used to play in a band called Solo that Ronald Moten managed, and we used to rehearse in his basement, and he and Dig Dug from Northeast Groovers, who's one of my closest friends, were the sort of co-managers of the band. And I left because we were playing all cover songs. It was at the birth of the Grown and Sexy movement. And I was like, I don't want to just play a bunch of cover songs. And Dig Dug said to me that, well, this is go-go. This is what, you got to do what people want to hear. This is go-go. And I said, you're Dig Dug. Go-go's whatever the fuck you say it is. And that's my perspective on it. Maybe, for right, wrong, or indifferent, I just feel like members of the go-go community get to decide
Absolutely.
what go-go is and what isn't.
That's what go-go is. The audience actually does get to decide. And if they decide that it's not go-go, that it's not, but that shouldn't stop you from trying to push the envelope. And honestly, I think, I'm also 43, and like there are people who are younger, like these young people don't care. Like they're not interested. Like, so I just think like, just give them the space, man. Just put them on stage, give them an instrument, record them, give them a platform. I think let's be pleasantly surprised. Let's do things to maintain the tradition, And so like I say, that's what I'm working on. So this is also part of like why the advisory board is going to be really important, because necessarily you're going to want to have people who know what go-go is, and unequivocally,
Right.
So, and so you're going to want to do that. But as time goes on, it's got to shift. Like it's got to shift. I mean, you got to, so they might sort of help shape who is defined as go-go right now. Because I think that's really important. Like we had a thing at we had a go-go town hall at the Kennedy Center that Mo and I did. Yeah. And what somebody said was that, we talked about doing an endowment, right, for go-go, so we don't have to be begging the council every year. And somebody said, oh, well, yeah, that's fine to do an endowment, but it shouldn't just be for go-go. It should be for all music, And I'm like,
God, that sounds like all lives matter to me. Shut the hell up.
Like, seriously, like, I'm just not like, no. But you know what? So, everybody was just sort of like, what? But I'm glad that he asked that question. And this happened to a new, white person to come to DC. I'm glad he asked the question, because that's exactly what will happen if nobody asks that question. You don't answer it definitively. That's what's going to happen. It's going to get all lives matter. It's going to be all music matters, and so and you don't want that. So I think be really clear about what the definitions are. Be really clear about who are the standard bearers. Be really clear about who they are, so that they can sort of transmit their knowledge, transmit that thing that they do, transmit the way they create community. But then there's a whole other realm of activity that will be around the young people. and so, and they're able to like make their own new traditions too. So I think you can do both things, and I think it'll all get sorted out. It'll get sorted out.
Right. Well, you reminded me that I don't think I finished my thought about what I was talking about with Chris Richards about, the tradition being passed down from generation to generation, and the fact that the generation now doesn't care. I feel like it's really important that if we don't figure, like the young people don't care honestly about the tradition. They don't care about the things that we care about because they haven't reached that level of thinking about things that way. They care about what's cool to their friends and what's cool to people that they look up to. And I just feel like right now, go-go is a bunch of, even the bounce beat bands are in their 30s, which even still at 14, 15 years old, 30 seems really old. It's a bunch of old dudes and women doing old shit that I don't care about as a 14-year-old. So I feel like I just hope that there's some way to inject some of that investment, or at least some type of resources, whether it be financial or not, into figuring out how to make something cool again. And maybe that's not, I guess that's sort of what I was asking earlier, because typically I think that comes from like the entrepreneurial community, not necessarily the, it's like, I'm not aware that, that Cash Money or No Limit, in New Orleans was in any part funded by, the city that I'm aware of. Maybe they were, and maybe it just wasn't part of their story. But so typically it doesn't come from that. But I feel like we need a little more help than your average genre in that respect, just because we don't really have any examples of where this has been successful outside of our little area. So there's no example to look at. You know what I mean? So maybe we need a little more juice.
I mean, New Orleans is a good place, or Nashville is a good place. The cities, like they invest, like Louisiana has one of the best funded humanities councils in the country. Like this is a state that really funds their art. Jazz Fest it's a whole like they make so much money off of Jazz Fest, and that's how they're able to take care of the artists. During COVID, like they've been getting COVID checks, because they're sitting on money, from the Jazz Fest.
Right.
So I think there's some initial investments from the city that can sort of take off. We've seen other things take off, like Broccoli Fest is another example. That was something from Events DC. They funded that, So,
I didn't know that. Yeah, I didn't know they did.
Yeah. So why not? And of course, they also had some corporate funders, but they were a major, investor in that early on. And so, the thing
about they're Live Nation
is no, the government isn't going to make anything cool. But I just know that like any high school you go to, there's the cool kid, and there's the cool. Like you can never tap out that resource of cool, among
right.
People. And somebody's going to pick up, and somebody's going to get it'll come together in ways that we can't really imagine it. And I think when you say help, I think you mean money. So I think there just needs to be money. Like that's what
I mean, that's where my thought process goes. I mean, there may be other ways. I'm just saying that, like the government is not going to create the cool, but in the same way that the Showmobile helped, maybe not to create the cool, but at least perpetuate the cool at the early stages of go-go.
To the cool. It gives a platform.
What's that?
It gives the Showmobile gave a platform to the cool.
Right, exactly. But the thing is now but at the time, I mean, at least from the way I look at it at the time, like being, like when I'm talking to Wink from Junkyard, or talking to, I don't remember who I was talking to, but everybody's like, I'm like, did you guys want to be, when you guys formed a band, or like 32, I guess, when you formed the band, did you want to be like Rare Essence or Chuck Brown, or did you want to be like, I don't know whoever was out at the time, you know what I'm saying? Did you want to be like Earth, Wind and Fire, or, what was your goal when you first started out? And most of them said Rare Essence or Chuck Brown or Trouble Funk or whatever. And so that was the definition of success at that time. And Showmobile, like perpetuated some of that. But now the younger generation, their definition of success is Shy Glizzy or Logic or, so I'm saying the stakes are higher now. So I'm just saying, is there a way that that some of these funds can be allocated to try to, create some type of similar platform that helps GoGo get to a higher level, as opposed, that would be interesting to the kids? Because what I'm worried about is not even just the they're making something cool or making the Coachella thing or whatever. I'm just saying that if we want to preserve the legacy of what this is, and the legacy of what this is passed down through the generations, if you don't make it cool to that youngest generation right now and figure out something that's going to appeal to them, you can put all the programs in the school you want. If it's not cool to them, they're not going to participate. They're not going to care. You see what I'm saying? So I feel like there's got to be some type of light at the end of the tunnel for them to look at, to be like, well, hey, if I make these compromises or make these sacrifices to be successful in my career, and I want keep this go-go train going, then there's got to be some type of incentive for them to do it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there does. And again, I don't know. Like, I don't have any of the answers. I mean, I'm just like, we're just like honestly a year and a half into like the fact that we could even have this conversation, like,
which is great.
Which like where we could even get, and it really has taken a lot of advocacy. With Don't Mute DC, we did 18 activations last year. It was crazy. Like, we did an ridiculous amount of like work. We worked with like 24 community organizations to just keep the momentum going, make people not forget. And, it's really gratifying to see like we're actually getting somewhere, and we're actually getting to the place where, this sort of can be institutionalized before they forget, and start blaming conga players for bullets again.
Right. Well, so what's the ultimate goal of Don't Mute DC, and what can people do to help?
So the ultimate goal of Don't Mute DC is to fight back against the erasure and the silencing of the heart of our city, the voice of our city. And so that means go-go is the obvious thing, but it's all of these things. Like, we have to have a voice for, against the nonsense they're doing in these schools. We got to have a voice against, Trump tear gassing people at the White House. We got to have a voice against, like, there's all kinds of things that we really need a voice in, that we cannot be muted for. Question of how people can get involved. Make GoGo Forever DC on Facebook. We've been like there. There are a lot of the activities going there. If you go to the website, don'tmutedc.com, there's also Make GoGo Forever on Twitter.
Can they, if they go to don'tmutedc.com, are there links to everything else, to all the social stuff on there?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm just gonna put that just so I can put it up on the screens.
And actually, Mo just released an original song. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, he sent it to me. He sent it to me. Yes, he sent me the video yesterday. He was supposed to send me the song. He sent me the song yet, but
putting the song. There's the Go-Go Museum Cafe, which makes my nerd heart very happy. How cool would a Go-Go Museum be? Like, how
Mo's been talking about the Go-Go Museum for, I think he told me about it probably 10 years ago. So he's been wanting to do it for a long time. I think it's a great idea.
Like anything else, it'll be a museum not like anything else, because it'll be like, well, at least where I see it, it's like, I think about the Shrine in Lagos, a mixture of that with like, a museum. You want to have some like good nerdy stuff there too.
What's this Shrine in Lagos? I'm not familiar.
So I don't know if you saw Jay-Z and Jada Pinkett Smith executive produced the Broadway musical called Fela.
Oh, about Fela Kuti?
Yes, Fela Kuti. Yeah. So Fela, and I was just in Nigeria in December, so I got to see the actual shrine. But basically, Fela, if there's something you can compare Gogo to, like his movement is sort of very similar in that, like, he played the shrine. They called it the shrine. It was basically like this conference. It's really like a hole in the wall, and hundreds of people would go and see him perform every single week. And it was sort of this legendary space where people came and nobody ever got tired of Fela. And it was this beautiful, and the Broadway musical really captured. So I just remember thinking about Gogo when I was seeing Fela, you know, like, cause it was it was all surrounded and all this like explosive dancing and energy and like big bands. You know, lots of energy, lots of horns, you know, and then Fela was, of course, this very like charismatic figure.
Yep.
Again, brought people, nobody got tired of him. They brought people back over and over and over again. And so I'm thinking about, when I think about the Go-Go Museum and Cafe, that's what I think about, like, you know, having a performance space, place to record, and also places to learn about the history. So, you know, I've been having fun, you know, working with Mo, thinking about what that will be, and you know, that's also something that some of the Go-Go, like the Go-Go Museum Cafe has a agreement with the library, and so already been collaborating on some exhibits and stuff like that with the MLK library. And so, you know, looking forward to like having that relationship grow, and teaching people how to do oral histories. So there's a whole pot of money for oral histories too. So people can to interview their relatives, their friends, and, you know, teaching people how to do oral histories, and then having a repository for all those oral histories at the library and the museum, because they'll sort of be the museum and the library will be working together. So, you know, we're doing a lot of cool stuff that's happening.
That's dope. That's dope. Can you watch the Broadway, the Fela play online anywhere, or is it only just you got to go?
Well, it's not around anymore, but it's got to be somewhere. Like, I'm telling you, if I need to find it. Like, literally the most amazing play that you'll ever see. And it just told the story of his life, but it was set in the shrine. So like when you're in the audience, it was like you were at the shrine, you know, and the dancers are coming down the aisle and they had like balconies up, and he just basically told the whole story of Fela. But the energy was so explosive, you know, in the shrine. And like I say, when I was there the whole time, I was thinking about Gogo, like every time, you know, that I went, because I saw it in New York, and then I saw it when it came to DC too.
Oh, they did it in DC too?
Yeah, it came to the Warner Theater. It toured. Like, it was huge. Like, it was so almost like not as big as Hamilton, but like it was like that level.
No, I remember hearing about it. I didn't realize that Jay-Z or Jada Pinkett Smith had anything to do with it. I know I've heard of the play, but I didn't know the actual shrine, but I definitely heard of the play. But
yeah, the actual shrine, it was amazing. And they I missed seeing a live performance there, because I think Fela's sons are still performing, and actually some of the stuff that WDC was working on before the damn COVID just started really
just screwed everything up. Yeah.
We wanted to do some sort of like bounce beat, Afro beat thing, you know, like some sort of like mix up, because they're so similar. And when I was in Nigeria, you know, I was able to make some good connections with music there. And so that's the thing that's really powerful about Gogo, is these diasporic connections. A lot of people wouldn't understand how somebody like me, who was born in Canada, and, you know, my parents are from Guyana, you know, how I would get into it. But like, when you kind of understand this in terms of like a, you know, diasporic art form, super like against the, you know, Eurocentric grain, you know, I just think it's just so powerful. And so we're really looking toward building up some of those connections. We also did this Mumbo versus Gumbo thing where we brought we brought in brass bands and go-go bands, and we had them, you know, going head to head last year, which was pretty cool. So we want to do a lot more of that kind of stuff.
That's dope. Yeah, they had, you know, Backyard did a few years ago. I booked them at House of Blues New Orleans a year ago, 2 years ago during Essence Fest. But prior to that, they had done Tipitina's. It was the HBO, The Wire versus, which is not exactly right because obviously Go-Go's not a Baltimore thing, but Big G was on The Wire, so whatever. So The Wire versus Treme, and I don't remember. Was it Dirty Dozen? I don't remember which band they played against, but yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, they played the Backyard one, which I'm like, that's really in New Orleans. But I actually talked to David Simon before we did Mumbo versus Gumbo because that was one of the inspirations too, because I'd known they had done this before. And New Orleans has they have a go-go cell. Like they have some mostly DJ Solstice was the main ringleader of people like supporting go-go music, but they get go-go music. My book came out. When my book came out, I did my book launch in New Orleans because the Black Journalist Convention was there, and I was really shocked because Chuck Brown had just passed away. I got so much love in New Orleans. Like I was on all these radio shows. People I was really faded, brought around the city. Like people were really, they really felt in their heart that like Chuck Brown was somebody really important to them that was lost. And so I got a lot of that love that came back to me. So I've been able to like build these connections with New Orleans over the years. And, again, I can't wait for this damn COVID stuff to be done so that we can do some more.
Tell me about it. I know. Well, when you're talking about the bounce beat and Afrobeat thing, it's interesting because Tabby Benet is a good friend of mine. I managed him for a while, and I'm his agent, and he is also a partner in this this production collective thing that I was telling you about. And we are obviously he's been a rapper, but he's originally from Togo, West Africa, and his father was a sort of famous musician from there. And the last EP, we put out an EP on him in 2008 that is very Afrobeat inspired, although it's not, he's sort of singing, if you will, which is, a departure for him. But musically it's very Afrobeat inspired. And so we are currently now, because he's a partner in this company, also working on a bounce beat remix of this EP. So it will be bounce beat. And it's a challenge trying to match the styles up and make it work, but we're gonna make something cool. So it'll be
I love it. And and it was the same sort of thing where and then probably have to go, but I'm going to share this one story that's a connection to this. So just like how Mark Barnes said, okay, anybody who plays go-go be fired. When I was in Lagos, the last night I was there, I was in all these like fancy, like, I don't know. I was in a lot of fancy places.
Bougie spots. Very
bougie. So this particular last place I went, the host of their equivalent of MTV, they were there. Oh God, why can't I think of Kehinde Wiley, who did the president's portrait? He rolled in. We're like, oh my God, Kehinde Wiley just came in. Cool, but all these little bougie spots that we go to, like I really wanted to hear some damn Afro beats. The whole time I went, everywhere I went, I wanted to hear it. And the spots where they weren't playing, they were playing like a lot of like 90s hip hop and like all this other, like maybe it'd be like a reggae set, no Afro beats. And and I wanted to hear like the new Afro beats because I really went on that rabbit hole last year.
Right.
So I didn't want to be that person. They were like, oh yeah, it'll be open to like, we party hard. This is Lagos. We're not going to go down to like 6 a.m. So I was like, okay, fine. So I was very patiently waiting for the Afrobeats. So finally I got one of my Nigerian friends to go talk to the DJ. And he said the DJ told him, he was told by the owner, not a single local song was he to play. And, it was so depressing, when this happens. But, like, I don't know what people just have. I don't know. People just, it's just depressing. Because, like,
we need to do another one and go down that rabbit hole of why that is.
Like, people just have low self-esteem. Like, they don't love themselves, I guess. I mean, why wouldn't you want to have something local? Like, that's the thing that's unique about you that's not like anybody else. Like, I can go, like, the music they play, they played Belle Biv DeVoe. They played all this stuff that I've heard a million freaking times. I did not want to go to Lagos to hear that.
Right. I didn't go to Africa to hear Belle Biv DeVoe, right? I can hear that at home.
And then that was so depressing, like two in the morning, and that's what the answer was. I was like, this is real depressing, but also very familiar because that's how it was.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. 100%. Well, listen, Natalie, I really appreciate you taking this time. I'm totally confused as to why we haven't met before, but I'm glad we did. And please let me know if there's anything that I can do to help, from afar. Mo sent me the video. I'm going to post it on the Instagram today or tomorrow. And let me know if there's anything else, that I can do. Obviously, anything that furthers the movement of go-go, I'm with it. So thank you again, and we'll do it again and go down the rabbit hole of why people don't want to play their own music in their own town.
Anyway.
All right. No, thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Have a good one. All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. That was Natalie Hopkinson, co-founder of Don't Mute DC and author of GoGo Live. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the subtitle, but professor at Howard University, very involved in the GoGo community. She had a lot of good things to say. So thank you for tuning in for that. Next week, I think we have Yendi, formerly of Mambo Sauce, and also formerly, if you may not know, background singer for Brandy and Aaliyah and Tank and a bunch of other people. My hat's crooked again, trying to figure it out. Anyway, tune into GOGOTIX.co for upcoming schedule. Also, check out don'tmutedc.com and help out in any way that you can there. You can get to all their social media platforms as well. And again, please subscribe and click the bell icon below so that you'll get notified of the upcoming shows. Thank you guys very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. No show tomorrow, but we'll see you next week. All right, have a good one.